All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar on sustainable funding for teacher apprenticeships. I'm excited to have you all come here today. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be here. My name's David Donaldson with the National Center for Grow Your Own. We're really excited to have this conversation today. We had an insane amount of folks sign up for this, especially just in the last, we had over 100 people sign up in the last 24 hours alone, which just shows the interest and the need to create sustainable funding pathways for this work. A little bit about the National Center for Grow Your Own. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that has the honor and privilege of supporting states, districts, and ed prep providers all across the country, as well as departments of labor in different states as well. Our main goal, and I would say feel free to laugh, but it's to create a world where you can become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And I'm so excited because the folks that we're going to have on this call today are proving that that is possible in their respective states. One of the other things, a little bit of background on our organization, is that a few of us come from the Tennessee Department of Education, where I used to be the chief of human capital and led the creation of Tennessee's statewide Grow Your Own program and the first registered apprenticeship approved by the U.S. Department of Labor for teaching profession. And we recently added Dr. Carla Warren from the West Virginia Department of Ed, who created the first youth apprenticeship. One of the things we also offer at the National Center for Grow Your Own is our National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network. Ben, if you wouldn't mind showing that slide. And so this network, which we started back in August of 2022, had 39 state members, or started with 7 state members. And this slide is even outdated as of today because we just added Vermont to our network. This network meets about every 4 to 6 weeks. Our next session actually happens to be tomorrow. We also happen to offer a similar network for districts and for ed prep partners or ed prep providers in partnership with our friends at Deans for Impact. All 3 of these networks are absolutely free. My colleague Ben will put a link in the chat later if you're a state agency representative, a district member, or a school district staff member, or a university member that would be interested in joining. But one of the things that I'm really excited about this state network is that North Dakota, Washington, D.C., and Delaware are all members of this network. And so you today are going to get to hear from 3, I want to be very clear, amazing educators, but even better people. And so Lori Matsky, Elizabeth Ross, and Michael Saylor, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and turning your screens on, and we'll get started for today's conversation. Welcome. Thanks for being here all. Really excited to have you here today. And folks, feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them at the end, but we'll see how this conversation goes. So starting with Lori. Lori, before you had a registered apprenticeship program in North Dakota, you started a Grow Your Own program for special educators, and then you expanded from there. Can you share about that work, that Grow Your Own work, and then including how you funded it?
Certainly, David. Good afternoon, everyone. So even pre-pandemic, the Office of Special Education in North Dakota worked with one university, and they created a para to teacher pathway program because we had a severe shortage of special education teachers. And so they used their state level IDEA dollars for this program. And it was just phenomenally successful. Everyone was talking about it. And we just got so many positive comments that when ESSER funds then became available, Superintendent Baszler decided to use some of those dollars to continue the program. So we started out with 1 round. We ended up in the end doing 3 rounds. So we funded 3 universities to keep that para to teacher pathway program going. And all of them very successful. All of them had waiting lists. Just a great program. And so we're very pleased to announce that the 10 original paras in that special ed cohort, they have all graduated. They are all now teaching special education in North Dakota schools. So a huge success story for us.
Lori, that's awesome. It's so I always get asked, where's the data? What's happening? So to see that we're moving from leading indicators to the lagging indicators, the actual results thus far, very, very exciting. Elizabeth, we're going to hop over to you in DC. So DC also launched a Grow Your Own program before pursuing the registered apprenticeship. Can you share about DC's Grow Your Own program and how it was funded?
And thank you so much again, David, for hosting this conversation. It's really a pleasure to be here and to talk more about the work that we've done in this space. I have benefited significantly from learning from partners such as yourself and also Michael and Lori. A number of years ago, we worked in close concert with some large advocacy organizations, including teacher-led advocacy organizations, and our city council, who functions as our state legislature in DC because we function as a city state, in order to establish the legislative language and then enable the resources, approximately $500,000 to launch DC's first Grow Your Own program. Under this program, we have worked with 3 ed prep providers. And one of the things that we have been laser focused on, and I can talk a bit about as the conversation advances, is how to make sure that in a jurisdiction with a high cost of living, which then can increase the costs associated with pursuing higher ed in the region, because all of the people employed by those ed prep providers have to be able to pay for that high cost of living. And so one of the things that we've been laser focused on, and that in part was one of our drives to shift from the Grow Your Own to the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship, was that ability to control costs. But in the early days, the Grow Your Own was an absolutely critical first move for us as a jurisdiction to be able to build some capacity at our both our ed prep level and among our LEAs to be able to host and support Grow Your Own future teachers, and also just to build some buy-in from the individuals who are in charge of making sure that we have funding to do this work and to do all of our work, and who frankly in the past couple of years have been in a position where they've had to make some difficult funding decisions. And so starting with Grow Your Own enabled us to essentially run a small pilot that we learned from significantly, and then we're able to translate into something else.
Yeah, I love that, Elizabeth, that talk about the lessons learned, and we'll get more into that and you'll share more about that. But when people ask me, I always think Grow Your Own and registered apprenticeships are like the stock market. The best day to have started investing was yesterday. So therefore the second best day is today. The best time to have launched a Grow Your Own program was yesterday, but the second best time is today. And there will be lessons learned. I think that's one thing, that's a good thing. We need to encourage innovation. We need to encourage learning from one another, but yet adapting to our local context. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and excited to hear more about those transitions to registered apprenticeship. And I love that you brought up costs, because we'll dig into that in a little bit. Michael, can you share about Delaware's Grow Your Own efforts, including how some of the funding that you have is reserved for certain eligible districts?
Sure. Thank you so much, David, and thank you for including Delaware in today's panel. And when we think about Grow Your Own, it means so many different things to so many. It's one of those terms that's thrown around a lot. So when we talk about Grow Your Own in Delaware, it is a pretty large umbrella where we have many programs that fall within it. And one of our early programs was actually Teacher Academies, which runs out of our CTE programs. Those are our 3 to 4 year high school pathways that really explore the occupation of teaching. All of our districts across the state have at least one high school that offers a pathway to learn more about the education profession. And you mentioned funding. So we utilize Perkins funding, and districts do as well, utilize Perkins funding for that work. Those seniors, when they graduate, many of them have the opportunity then to take the Praxis Core or the Parapro to get their certification to become a paraprofessional. And at the same time, they're able to get up to 12 college credits in our state program, or in some of our local programs, as many as 30 credits. So you can imagine that those experiences give them opportunities for things like job shadowing and mock interviews and resume workshops and mentorship. So Delaware was one of the first states in the nation to have those teacher academies in their high schools. Another program that falls under that umbrella is our residency program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as our conversation continues as well. But we have vetted teacher residency programs across the state, which gives really the gold standard for being able to provide a year-long clinical experience. And the state has made considerable effort to promote these through the use of stipends. So we have $20,000 to $25,000 stipends that the state provides. And for the first time in the fall, we're going to have states that braid some of their funding to be able to offer year-long teacher residency stipends at $40,000 to $45,000. And what that does is they make a 3-year commitment to stay in the state in our schools. So that's about a $2 million budget that we've committed each year. And then finally, the Grow Your Own grants that we provide are really a partnership between districts as well as the state and ed preps. So we have 4 education, prep providers right now that are participating in these grants. Those candidates participate at no cost, including wraparound services. They are employed as a paraprofessional while they're taking their courses. And they also have a 3-year commitment then. If we're going to be paying for the cost of their program, then they're going to spend 3 years in our classrooms minimum as well. So that's a $2 million annual budget that we have. And you mentioned, David, that that's targeted. So we target those grants at our districts that have high need schools, just because our data shows that that's where the greatest need is. We've scaled that from our early work with the National Center for Grow Your Own to about 10 candidates to about 75 candidates right now. To give you some context, in Delaware, we're hiring about 500 to 600 teachers a year. So being able to produce 75 candidates just through the Grow Your Own grants is a significant effort in reducing our unfilled classrooms that we have now.
That's awesome. I just love hearing these stories, especially when people think it's not possible to become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And you just showed how Delaware is approaching that work. I also really appreciate that point you made about sometimes with Grow Your Own, there's a lack of shared definitions in that space. I mean, we've heard people say it's a career day for middle schoolers, all the way to, it's earning a post-bac license, type of program. So I think we like at the National Center for Grow Your Own, the definition we use is a clear articulated pathway for an aspiring educator to become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And if you notice, we don't put an age on there. We don't put an educational background on there. We could be talking about a 15, 25, 35, 45, 55, 65-year-old. And we could be talking about somebody with a bachelor's, an associate's, or no college at all. And I think that's what's going to be really exciting. Keep that in mind as you hear from Delaware, D.C., and North Dakota, the different groups of people they serve from whether, based on educational background, as well as based on age groups. It's really, really interesting. This work should always be adapted to the local context, and yet it is possible in all 3 of these states and many others to ensure no out-of-pocket costs for candidates. So thank you for that. So all 3 of you have shared a little bit about how you grow your own efforts. We're kind of like a precursor to your registered apprenticeship work. Can you now each share about why you chose to pursue a registered apprenticeship? How is it similar or different to your Grow Your Own work? And how are you approaching funding for the registered apprenticeship? Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll go to Michael, and I'll go to Lori. You all don't need to remember the order. I'll do my best to do that. But Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
David, as I mentioned in my opening, cost is top of mind for us and sustainability of this program. In particular, we are in a position in DC where we are in a tight budget climate, as I know many states are, and so we are working to be quite judicious. At the same time, we are very fortunate that we have an executive and a legislature that firmly believe in fully funding our schools and that teachers are the most important intervention and support that we can provide to promote and sustain and accelerate student learning. So we're lucky in that we're working in a climate where we don't have to do a lot of work on the front end to convince the folks with budgetary authority that this work really matters. At the same time, we do have to spend a lot of time demonstrating that we are being good fiscal stewards of these limited resources. And so the journey that we went on this year to transition from the first 3 years of implementation of our Grow Your Own program to a teacher apprenticeship, a registered teacher apprenticeship, really was one of demonstrating sustainability. And under our Grow Your Own program, we were operating under legislation that directed us to provide grant awards through a grant-making system that provides funds to grantees on a reimbursement basis. And so there is some level of administrative oversight and support that's needed both from the agency and at the grantee level in order to operationalize and implement those grants. And there is also some, in absence of an opportunity from the state educational agency, and I'm thinking in particular to the great question that Megan just put in the chat around efforts that we're seeing happening around bilingual educator recruitment and pathways. We did not have that same level of authority under the Grow Your Own programming to really target our supports and our resources towards our areas of highest need. So DC is atypical nationally in that our 3 areas of highest need are elementary education, ECE, and early childhood education, and special education. Special education is an area of high need nationally, but elementary is very atypical. And so under the registered teacher apprenticeship, we were able to demonstrate to our, first to our internal team, then to our executive team in putting together a budget, and then to our state legislature, our city council, that we were able to leverage the same amount of funding, about $500,000 in DC, to serve approximately double the number of candidates, and to do it in these high need subject areas that our LEAs are hungry for supports in. We were also particularly excited about the transition from the GYO programming to the registered teacher apprenticeship programming, because it unlocked for us the potential to apply for federal funds under the federal SAFE grant, or the expansion grant for apprenticeships. We're still awaiting a final word on whether we are the lucky recipients of that grant, but yes, our fingers and toes are crossed, because we see that as a critical opportunity to support the state level investment that we have made in registered teacher apprenticeship, and as is in the name of the grant, actually expand that to serve even more candidates.
Elizabeth, I love that you hit on the question in the chat around, English as a second language, as well as highlighting special ed. Lori talked about in the beginning, North Dakota started with special ed. We see that everywhere, right? Special ed and ESL priority areas. And yet we've seen, all different folks be able to prioritize that in this work. This is an opportunity. When you say adapt to local context, if DC has a need, if Delaware has a need, if North Dakota has a need, you can say, this is what we're going to prioritize. There's also other things that can be prioritized in this work, like the science of reading, or high quality instructional materials, or culturally responsive pedagogy. That's what can make this work really interesting opportunity to codify what is best for Delaware, what's best for DC, what's best for North Dakota. And so that's really interesting to see. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Elizabeth, the ESL piece, as well as other addressing critical shortage areas. Michael, how about things in Delaware?
Sure, thanks so much. And you're right. And we were able to do that with our Grow Your Own grant, where we needed to see, how are you recruiting diverse candidates? How is the science of reading being addressed within your program? So sometimes it's carrots and sticks, right? So the question that you asked around why apprenticeships, why did we pursue that? So I shared some of the other programs that we had going on. At the same time, we really had an eye on the data that we were collecting in Delaware, and we do a lot of data collection, and there are 3 big pieces of data that we collect that are really related to why we knew that an apprenticeship would meet our needs. One is a perception survey that we do every year. So 1 year out from graduating, every Delaware ed prep graduate will receive a survey, and they'll share their perceptions about how prepared they were for their position. So you can imagine what we see, right? ARTC folks have a very different perception than folks that may have done a 10-week clinical experience versus those in a year-long teacher residency. So what we quickly saw is that the longer they're in the classroom, no surprise, before graduating, the better prepared they felt in that first year. So that was one set of data that we had. Another is our mobility survey. So every time an educator changes positions in the state, it could be within the district, it could be outside the district, they're going to receive a survey from us because we want to know why. Why is it that you are changing positions? And sometimes it's good mobility and oftentimes it's not. And then finally, we do a talent practices survey each year with all of our HR directors to find out what are the critical areas that are difficult to fill, and what are the challenges that you're facing in recruitment. So there are many challenges, right? When we looked at an apprenticeship, the apprenticeship was going to pull together the strategies that we were already using and use the data that we had, which was that they needed more time under the guidance of an excellent teacher to be prepared for this really challenging position known as a teacher, right? So we were able to pursue that through a House bill. I know that we'll probably talk a little bit about legislators, but I met early on with our chair of the House Education Committee and said to her, I want to pursue this. I want to make sure the Department of Labor will pursue it with us. So we strategically created a bill that said we would run a pilot this year for an apprenticeship, and that the Department of Labor would have to work with the Department of Education on doing this. So it made both agencies accountable to the legislators and accountable to one another. In addition, it provided a lot more funding options. So we already had funding set aside for Grow Your Own, which was a very similar model to our apprenticeship. It also allowed us to tap into the free community college offerings that we give every Delawarean. So everyone in Delaware can get an associate's degree at no cost. So we knew that we could get folks to 60 credits at no cost. We just needed to get them from 60 credits to a bachelor's degree, and we could do that with the apprenticeship program and with some extra funding from the Department of Labor. So it was really a no-brainer. We were able to launch in one district this year. We're hoping, just as Elizabeth is that there's some more funding coming through. We've got a few outstanding grants that we're waiting to hear back on. But then what we'd like to do is take it to scale. However, some of those early grow your own programs that we had can easily be flipped into an apprenticeship model now that we have the apprenticeship approved.
Yeah, I love to hear the constant innovation, lessons learned. Appreciate you took a data-informed approach to this work, tapping into new dollars that then can influence previous programs. And this can be a melting pot. We should always be tweaking. And so I appreciate that, Michael. Lori, how about yourself? Less differences, same as Grow Your Own and apprenticeship. Why'd you pursue it? How'd you approach funding?
So at the time when Tennessee became the first state to get approved, there was definitely a buzz in the air all across the nation. And, everybody was talking about it. Everybody wanted to jump on that bandwagon. And so this occurred right at the time when our 3 ESSER-funded parent-to-teacher programs were really taking off. And so similar to Michael, it just seemed like a no-brainer that, applying for the registered teacher apprenticeship, would be a logical next step. We knew that the ESSER funding would eventually be going away. So we saw the opportunity to apply for a registered apprenticeship program to maybe sustain the program and keep it going long term. There are definitely a lot of similarities between the 2 programs. They both have the basic same concept of taking a paraprofessional and helping them become a licensed teacher. However, there are some differences as well. With the registered apprenticeship program, there are more reporting requirements. that must be adhered to. One thing I really like about the Registered Apprenticeship program is the requirement to have a strong mentoring program. That's something that's lacking in our ESSER funded and state funded programs. And I think it really makes a difference. You know, I'll get emails from paraprofessionals that are in the ESSER funded or state funded programs, and they're like, you know, thank you so much for this opportunity, but I just can't do it. I can't work all day, go to school at night, you know, be a single mom of 4 kids. And so it's just a lot of work. And so without a mentoring program and those wraparound supports, you know, I could see where it would just become overwhelming. And so that's, you know, a great benefit of the WRAP is that, you know, it has wraparound supports built into it. It has a mentoring program. Also, as David mentioned, you know, there are differences in requirements for, you know, a grow your own versus the WRAP. And so with our state and ESSER funded programs, they could start from scratch. You know, they could have absolutely no credits at all and, you know, start in the program, where with our registered teacher apprenticeship program, they have to have that associate's degree, so that we can ensure that they can get through the program and become a licensed teacher, you know, within the program's time frame. So yeah, some similarities, some differences, but overall it's been great. And you know, we're very fortunate in North Dakota that we don't have funding issues. We have other issues. You know, it hasn't been smooth sailing, but funding is not one of them. We still have those ESSER funds programs going, you know, until September 30th. They're still in play. We have state funding, which I'll talk about later, and we have federal funding, which I know we're going to talk about later too. So we have lots of funding in North Dakota for this work, and we're very blessed for that.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. So this one, two of you have already hit on it, and I know one has a lot to say about it. And so the SAFE grant, that's something that's come up a little bit. I think we can probably hit on that one relatively quickly. Elizabeth brought it up with, it's the U.S. Department of Labor State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula Grant, SAFE. A lot of us all have our fingers crossed, as it's supposed to be starting July 1. But all of you have pursued it. And so I'm just kind of curious, why is it attractive to your pursuit of supporting your teacher apprenticeship work? Elizabeth, let's go ahead with you first on this one.
David, I'm happy to start with this one, and I also have been monitoring the chat, and there are some great questions in here about relationships and partnerships with state departments of labor, and so that is relevant to my response here. In DC, our state department of labor is called the Department of Employee Services, or DOES, and we are delighted to be working in really, really close partnership with them. The Department of Employee Services is the Department of Labor grantee for DC, so they receive all of the formula labor funds, and then we work in partnership with them for competitive funds, like, for example, the SAFE grant. And over the past few years, we have set up regular calls and regular communications with them in order to ensure that we are working hand in hand with them on these competitive applications, so that we can make DC as attractive as possible when opportunities like this come up. For us, as the state educational agency, this is the SAFE grant opportunity is so attractive, not only because it includes explicit funding, but also because it puts us in a position to work consistently and continually and really change the way that we do business with our Department of Employee Services. We have a separate and distinct registered apprenticeship council working specifically in concert with them through our Department of Employee Services was critical to getting our registered state apprenticeship. And in large part, much of that work was catalyzed because we were so attracted to the opportunity provided by the SAFE grant. David, some of the best advice that you gave us early on in this process was to begin working very closely with our Department of Employee Services, and the relationships are different in every state. And I am really excited that this relationship has caused us to think creatively about other things that we might want to contemplate doing in future years, things like pre-apprenticeship programs and other opportunities that we may want to engage in with them. And so having that relationship relationship built has been a really a really powerful incentive to not just do this work well and continue to do this work well, but has also been a catalyst for generating new ideas about how we might partner, which becomes increasingly important from a programmatic lens as we are in process of reimagining our high school graduation requirements. And so being able to think about this work in partnership with our Department of Labor is just really, really exciting at this moment. And we certainly could do that in the absence of the SAFE grant, but having the SAFE grant is a very powerful motivator to engage in that in collaboration with them. So we're glad for it for those reasons.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, just now I'm going to say an I statement. In my experience, like in working in education, state departments of ed, like we have silos within our own department, let alone amongst other government agencies. I didn't even know there was a Department of Labor and Workforce Development 5 years ago, when I was in Tennessee. It was like, what's that? And so it's fascinating to see. I love, that you're, Elizabeth, you mentioned, what these partnerships potentially will even lead to even more work taking place. It's awesome when we can learn from one another. I don't know the first thing about plumbing, welding, or cybersecurity. A lot of the times labor might not know the first thing about teaching, but you put us all together in the room, a lot of good can come out of that. That's when you can get, apologies to the math teachers, but that's when you can get those 1 + 1 = 3 every now and then. So Michael, how about yourself with the SAFE grant? Why'd you do it? What's going on in Delaware?
Sure. So, much like what you're describing, David, we did not have a relationship with the Department of Labor, at least not within the Educator Excellence Work Group. Our CTE work group did. So I remember very early calls where David and his team would help facilitate those conversations to try to get everybody to understand, because we really weren't understanding what we were even asking for early on in an apprenticeship. And it was new territory for our Department of Labor as well. They were very open to the idea. And recently, a few members of my team attended a Department of Labor event, and the one apprenticeship program that kept being repeated was just how proud they were of being able to partner with us for the registered teacher apprenticeship. We did do the base formula funding only for SAFE. And if you think about SAFE, we've thrown the acronym around a lot. So if you're not familiar, it stands for State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula. And what better thing to expand than the number of teachers when we have so many vacancies? So it did. It was just, again, it made a lot of sense to partner to do that work. We did not apply for the competitive grant the first year, which was wise for us because we needed to understand it better before we got a whole lot of money, and we weren't quite sure what it is that we were doing, because there are different approaches to apprenticeships in Delaware. Yes, the district was the employer, so yes, they're being hired as a para. The Department of Labor, yes, they were our registration agency, but the Department of Education wanted to be the sponsor. And I know that that's different from state to state. That was important for us so that we could really monitor the quality of the program. And we have a small team. I have one person, Ann Labengana-Clay, who is an amazing champion of this work on the team. So it is more work serving as the sponsor, but it was important to us as well. So now that we've made it through that first year with a successful cohort, now we're ready to look at what does that look like. And now we're looking for some of the competitive funding. There was a good question that I didn't articulate well around residencies and how do residencies fit in, and is it the same as an apprenticeship? And it's not for us, it's part of it. So the residency is the final year of the apprenticeship. So we have residency standards. So our apprentice is not only meeting the competencies that are required in our application through the Department of Labor, but that clinical experience also has to meet the requirements of a year-long teacher residency. And what that allows us to do is to be able to braid some funding as well, because we already had these stipends for residents. So we were able to use that money more flexibly and also be able to go through some strategic staffing models as well to use some other underutilized funding in districts.
Well, first off, Michael, shout out to Ann. We love her too. She's
the best.
awesome. And one of the things, you know, we hear this a lot. I apologize. I don't know who to give credit to, but like all professions exist because of teachers. And I think that is something that has actually really caused a lot of state departments of labor and at the federal level an embracing of the teacher apprenticeship. It's really like I really love working with the labor folks because they're very matter of fact. They want to get people jobs. They want to get people good paying jobs. And so it's been really fun. And I hope, you know, the three of you have all had that experience, you know, as getting to know your labor folks. One thing that I really want to highlight, and then Lori, I'm going to hit you up on the SAFE grant because there's a lot of cool stuff. So I don't want to take away your thunder. One thing that from our lens, as we try to, point out things that could be better, we love that this SAFE grant has, Michael, you talked about the base funding. So simply by applying, a state automatically gets some money. Let's just work with me here, folks. Again, I'm not a math person, but about $90 million, of which 45 is reserved for all 50 states plus territories and DC. And it's allocated based on basically size or apprentices registered. Some version like that. Don't quote me on that. But simply by applying, you get some money. And then separately, there's about 45 million reserved for a competitive grant. This is where I'm speaking for myself here, because I don't want to get anybody on this panel in trouble. It's solely a National Center for Grow Your Own thing. But we would really like to see the U.S. Department of Ed, and I said this at our national convening, have a similar grant. There is no grant opportunity for states to do Grow Your Own or registered apprenticeships. Yes, there's TQP, there's Augustus Hawkins. There's all these other ones that can do Grow Your Own, that can do registered apprenticeships, that can do residencies. But for districts or ed preps, there should be a grant that is exclusively for states. And the reason why I'm going to keep pushing this, because that's part of my job, is I want to be able to see DC, North Dakota, Delaware, and all other states be able to serve more people in becoming teachers for free. But there have been some cases, and it's kind of a question that we did get, where some labor agencies did not prioritize teaching because it might not be a priority this year, or there could be different things at play, but it prevented some state departments of ed were not able to apply for the SAFE grant because labor got precedent and maybe a new stadium was being built. So they had to focus on electricians. We really need to see a grant for SEAs that can do Grow Your Own. I'm going to get off my soapbox. Lori, talk about North Dakota's success with the SAFE grant.
Yeah, getting the SAFE grant last summer was critical to the success of our registered teacher apprenticeship program. We applied for both the base and the competitive. And so between the two, we received about $4.1 million. And we were so excited. I wasn't sure at first. And so I was texting David, I think we got both. Oh my gosh. So it was super exciting. But I agree with the other panelists in the doors that it opened, because similar to what has been stated, we didn't really work with the Office of Apprenticeship and Commerce and some of the other ones as closely. And so we really started working more collaboratively with all of our partners across the state. We have an office of one, Barry Dutton, in North Dakota, and got to know him, and he was instrumental in helping us. And we really found the 4-year commitment really attractive. And so that was a huge factor in applying for the SAFE grant, that now we'd be able to get the base funding and have the competitive funding for 4 years. And it allowed us to fund a temporary employee, similar to what Michael had said. North Dakota is a very small state agency. I think we're the smallest in the nation. We have 80 staff. And so we don't have individuals who are able to work on apprenticeships. And we knew that we wanted, in North Dakota, the Department of Public Instruction is the sponsor as well. So the SAFE grant allowed us to hire a temporary employee We are fortunate to find a retired educator, Dr. Lynn Hammond. She's phenomenal. And it also allowed us to continue working with David and his team at the National Center for Grow Your Own. So just in addition to, funding all of the apprenticeship programs over the next 4 years, the partnerships that it has enabled us to continue working with, it has just been amazing. Also, for anybody who is waiting for the announcements to be made here soon, just know that if you do get the grant, it also comes with so many supports. And so the U.S. Department of Labor has been great to work with. They're very responsive. They provide lots of trainings and recording and webinars. In addition, they provide you with your own personal coach. So we have coaching meetings set up once a month. And Caleb has been wonderful in helping us through the program. You get to collaborate with other states, similarly to what David does with his national center. So there are lots of supports that are provided when you get the grant. But again, we feel very fortunate that we received it, and it's been critical to keep our registered apprenticeship program going.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. It's worth the wait, right, Lori? It's worth the wait. Can we? Okay, we're sending positive vibes to Delaware, D.C., and everyone else that is representing a state that applied. Lori, I'm going to start with you on this one. So another thing that y'all have in common is getting your legislative or your governor, or in D.C.'s case, mayor, to prioritize this work, either via Grow Your Own or registered apprenticeships. Can you each share about how you approached either getting legislation passed or providing a strong argument for your superintendent or secretary of education to be able to state a strong case to whether it's legislators, city council, governors, mayors? And then also, if applicable, can you share any funding? And a lot of you have hit on this already, but it's really, that's the topic of this webinar, so I'm going to ask you to hit on it again. Can any of you share about any funding that has been allocated legislatively for this work? Lori, we'll start with you.
As ironically as it sounds, we didn't even really have to lobby or pursue to get funding from our legislature. The field did that for us. And so due to the phenomenal success of that first special education program and the 3 ESSER funded programs that followed, it just got out. It was like wildfire. And so the legislators started hearing from parents and paras and teachers and administrators, oh my gosh, this para to teacher program is wonderful. And so they came to us, and they were the ones that kind of pursued it and said, if we would provide you with funding, would you be willing to administer this and keep it going? So it was kind of flipped as to how it usually works with the legislative session. So we have session every other year. So in 2023, our state legislature provided us with $3 million to continue with the ESSER funded para to teacher programs. And we just recently found out a couple weeks ago that it was built into our base budget. And so we thought it was kind of like a one-time thing, and we'd have to go and show, success, and which we could easily do, but we thought we'd have to ask for the funding again, but it's now part of our base budget. So for the unforeseeable future, this $3 million will be available to us to continue the program. So again, I think when you have something that's really successful, it sells itself. And that's how it kind of worked in North Dakota.
Laura, I just got to hit on that part you mentioned about selling itself, because we had that in Tennessee. Superintendents were our greatest advocates. You better believe, because state legislators will call their soups and say, hey, what do you need me to do this year? What do you need me to advocate for? And superintendents said, this Grow Your Own is the best thing since sliced bread, gets $5 million into the budget. They did the work for us. It was awesome to see. We'll go Michael next on this one. And Michael, I know Delaware has some legislation that you kind of referenced or you would say you talk more about, and then Elizabeth.
Sure, thanks so much. So our legislators in Delaware are part-time. We have 2 legislative sessions throughout the year. I thought that that was infrequent, but now that I hear Lori say that it's every other year, I'm really curious about how that works. But so prior to each legislative session, I make sure to find some time to be able to meet with the chair of the Senate Education Committee and the chair of the the House Education Committee as well, to talk about some of the initiatives that we want to look at for the upcoming year. And we've experienced success around things like residencies, the Grow Your Own grants, and they're excited to see it. So in the recent Raise the Bar report that came out for the second year in a row, Delaware has seen the largest growth in the nation of our educator workforce post-pandemic. I think that that gets our legislators excited to see that the things that we're putting in place are working. So they love to run bills. They love to have their names attached to bills that are successful. And it just seems to make the most sense that we meet with them prior and we generate some of these great ideas. Otherwise, we end up, and in the past we have at times ended up with some bills that we weren't quite sure what to do with. So we have a really good relationship with our legislators in Delaware. They participate in things. So when I do visits to see the residency programs and to meet with residents or meet with apprentices, we'll ask a few legislators to be included in that work so that they can see the excitement and speak to it. So we're lucky in Delaware that we have such a great relationship with our legislators. Funding is the same. So it's not uncommon for a legislator to say, do you need more funding for residents? Do you need more funding for Grow Your Own? So we have about $5 million of state funding that's set aside around recruitment and retention. Much of that funding, though, is tied to districts that have high needs schools, which is about half of our districts. So we're able to use some of that other funding that we get on the labor side to be able to help out those districts that may not be able to tap into some of that state funding that has some of those restrictions. And then for our teacher academy, I mentioned earlier, we're tapping into some of our title fund, or I'm sorry, our Perkins funding. And then for some of that residency work, which gets braided with our apprenticeship, it gets a little blurry, but our districts then are tapping into some of their federal funds to be able to do that.
Great. Elizabeth?
So much. So our city council, which again functions as our state legislature here in DC, doesn't have a discrete education council. Instead, education sits in the committee of the whole, which means that we don't have one specific legislator that we're working with when we are trying to ensure that our legislature understands the importance and the impact of the work that we are doing, and high priority work, understands the costs associated with it. And we also have, in part because we are a relatively small jurisdiction, and in part because of where education sits in regard to our state legislature more broadly, we have a lot of a very active public that shows up. It is not infrequent to have north of 400 public witnesses for education hearings, and including our budget hearings. And so there's a lot of engagement from the public that our legislature really does give full faith and credit to. This work stream more broadly, I think I mentioned at the outset that we had a number of advocacy organizations, including teacher voice advocacy organizations, that were very, very active in promoting and advancing the legislation that authorized and then the funding that enabled the Grow Your Own programming a number of years ago. That was in 2021. And then subsequent to that, part of the work that we did, and there was a question about this earlier about what kind of data we're collecting and how we're thinking about reporting. We've been very, very deliberative about monthly collecting and reporting data about what the enrollees look like, how they are progressing, where they are coming from, so that we could better understand the impact and the implications of the program. As I also mentioned in the chat, we have spent the past couple of years just over $500,000, 550K on a registered teacher apprenticeship. We are a small jurisdiction, so that's not an insignificant amount of local funding for us to put towards this kind of work. And that is then the money that we are using from a local level with local funds to support registered teacher apprenticeship. And the argument that we were able to make there in order to convince our state legislature that this was a good move was really related to the ability to control on costs and serve, again, double the number of program participants under the registered teacher apprenticeship as compared to the GYO, just given the different composition of the funding. And so, for us, it not dissimilar to what Lori shared and what Michael shared, the through line and advice and recommendation that I would give is just pay attention to the decision makers in the local context, where those decisions live and who is influencing them. And then, certainly make sure that you're working with and understanding the needs of those individuals that are making decisions, and then able to support them in considering how this work can more broadly support their aims and their goals.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. For those who, you might be saying, okay, really good insight, really helpful to hear how states have been able to get money legislatively. I also want to speak very quickly to districts. If you're wondering, well, my state might not be helping me. I might not be in North Dakota, D.C. Or Delaware. What can I do? And so we have a quick slide we just want to hit on. And if you go, Ben, if you want to later put in the chat about our webinar link, we hit on this slide more in our webinar. So I'm just going to do very quick. But we did want to point out, here's things that are in a district's locus of control today. So even if you have one teacher vacancy, you can launch a grow your own program, because average teacher salary with fringe, you're going to budget at about 70,000, if not more. And so if you have a long-term sub in there, that's going to cost you 25 to 30K. 70, even if we're going starting teacher pay of 45, with fringe, it will be 60. 60 minus 30 is $30,000. Where is that money going? That money can be used to pay for 2 to 3 paraprofessionals to get their degree. ESSER, you can use that while we have it till September. Some folks are getting extensions. Great, more power to you. Your Title II, your IDA, your Title III funds can be used. And if you're wondering, wait a second, how can IDA and Title III be used for this? Well, we had the earlier questions about special ed and ESL. So I could pay for up to, in Tennessee, we required all grow your own apprenticeship programs to be dual certified in either special ed or ESL. So now I could pay for up to 50% of it with IDA funds if I required special ed. So just different things to consider. I could pay for up to 50% of it with Title III funds. You heard Michael talk about how Delaware braids funds. They've had to take that approach. This is what we recommend. You can use state general funds, Perkins 5, and if you're doing high school programs, take as much advantage of dual credit, dual enrollment, early college. Now, I get some people disagree with this, but we strongly, strongly recommend that we should not be using apprenticeships to cover salary or wages. It should only go to tuition, books, and fees. Why do we say this? Because if you have teacher vacancies, you have paraprofessional vacancies. And so slot people into those positions, whether they're a bus driver, cafeteria worker, a tutor, a parent, or guardian. Now a district has a recruitment strategy. Come and work in our district for 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, and you can become a teacher. We'll help pay for you to do it. You heard a lot of folks talk about, Elizabeth's put numbers in the chat about how much they're paying for the amount of candidates they have. Michael gave numbers. Lori has numbers. The key here is never pay market rate tuition. Enrollment in universities is down over the last 10 years. They need us just as much as you need them. And so on average, we've been able to get the cost down to about $10,000 per degree. So really push on that. And you heard creative strategies of folks leveraging community colleges. And there's many other strategies we could go into. Be intentional with your high school programs. Want to emphasize that. A lot of good work being done at the high school, but don't allow that to be a leaky pipeline. We got to make sure those kids have a chance to finish their degree. Ben, you could come off the slide. The last thing I'll just say is, a lot of districts have tuition reimbursement programs. Change that to tuition investment. Leverage that money. Negotiate with a university for a deal. And there's somebody who had a question in the chat, said, I had a university that didn't even want to talk to me unless I guaranteed them 50 people. You don't need them. You don't need them. That's not the right attitude. They're here to serve, just like we're here to serve kids. And so trust me, take the Kevin Costner approach, not Yellowstone, but Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Tennessee had 42 EPPs. I only needed one to play ball. We went from 1 to 7 to 14. You can do it too. So with that, I'm gonna do I think probably final question. And Michael, you hit on it earlier, but I think it's my favorite question because it's really important. Quality control. Can each of you, and sorry folks, probably 1 minute, so a short version, can each of you tell me how you have ensured or are approaching quality control in the design of your programs, as well as selecting high quality but affordable ed prep providers for these programs? Elizabeth, I'll give it to you. Then Michael and Lori, I'll have you close out. Elizabeth?
David, this is the work that we're doing in the teacher pipeline space. Grow Your Own Registered Teacher Apprenticeship is part of a broader initiative to ensure that we have high quality preparation here in DC, and then a high level of preparation, particularly in the areas that are highest need, and also that reflect the rich diversity of our DC student body. And so we have been laser focused on those few things in recent years, and recently did a new package of ed prep regulations 2 years ago that then enabled us to leverage the work that we were doing through our ed prep approval process to make informed decisions about potential grantees or partners for this work. So in short, we leveraged other tools that we have, like our regulatory tools and like our ed prep approval process, in order to ensure quality.
I love it. And I love that you tied it to the bigger picture, right? This is a way to raise, we can raise the bar in all teacher prep. This is just one potential pathway to see the results of that. Michael?
Sure. So when we think about quality, we were able to use some of the current initiatives that we had. So we had already created standards around a year-long teacher residency. So we needed alignment between our apprenticeship work and that existing work that was happening. And then we are lucky to have a team of 5 on my team that does research and analytics. So those folks have created new data collection around monitoring the implementation of our programming. And then we also have data collections planned in the future. So we'll be looking at what do their teacher evaluations look like when they enter the classroom? What does their retention look like? Are we going to see higher retention? So we have some plans to be able to continue to monitor it as well. And then ultimately, when you think about data collection, I had mentioned in one of the responses that, yes, some of that is required as well with the Department of Labor. So that's another quality check.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Michael. Lori?
I'll highlight 3 quick ways that we work to ensure quality. Number 1, in North Dakota, the approval process for ed prep providers is very rigorous. Our teacher licensing board has not kind of jumped on the bandwagon across the state to look at, being more flexible to, address the teacher shortage. Our standards are still very, very high and rigorous. So first and foremost, we have that. Plus, we created a pre-approval process when we began this work, and we reached out to all the universities, and we told them about this work, and we had them pre-apply. If you want to be part of the Grow Your Own and the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship, pre-apply and show documentation that you have an approved program, and provide us with the pathways that you have available. This really helped with transparency, because anyone can go to our website, click on each university, and some of them only have 1 pathway, special ed. Some of them have 12, in every single chemistry and, just every single little domain. And so they had to show us their pathways that will be part of the program, and make sure that everything is available online, because with us being so rural, the paras have to be able to do this online from home. And then finally, we ensure the quality just of our current programs by constantly providing that support. Dr. Hammonds meets with every single one of them every single month. We've gone out and we've done site visits to all of them. And so just constantly being there, providing that support and ensuring the quality.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Elizabeth. I want to tell everybody January 29th to the 31st, 2025, we'll be hosting our second annual National Convening on Registered Apprenticeships and Teaching. I can tell you Delaware, North Dakota, and DC will all be presenting there. So you'll be able to meet these folks in person, ask them how the work's going. We'll find out if they got the SAFE grant by then. And we'll have many, many other states. We had over like 65 proposals already for, it's incredible just for speaking group. So thank you so much for coming, Ben. If you just want to throw up our contact us slide, we really appreciate folks taking time. Oh, no worries, Ben, if we don't have it up, it's all right. Oh, thanks. But again, thank you to North Dakota, DC, and Delaware as being members of our national network. Thank you to those who took time to attend today. We'll eventually get this webinar recording posted on our website. Y'all have a good day. Take care now. Bye-bye.